welcome to the NOVAcast, episode 6. Paul Wegman, CEO of Nova Automation. Paul, thanks for joining us. This one's been a long time coming. Excited to have you.
Absolutely, Josh. Excited to do this with you.
Cool. So we can get into a lot of things today, right? You got a ton of interest. You've got a great story. But where I want to really start and dive right into this is talk to us a little bit about your journey to Nova. Were you always entrepreneurial, as a kid? And then how did you land as the CEO of Nova Automation?
That's a great question. It started so early in my life. I think I've always been a builder. I from organizing my toys and building Legos and constructs and log cabins out of sticks with toys as a kid. I've always been inspired to build things, create things. And as we go back years to how this all started, I think back to my time going through high school, my time in the military, my time after that, and all the different pieces. And it's funny, I really never asked that question to myself. I think, Josh, that's a great question, and I'm kind of on the spot here thinking about it. And as I put myself through answering that question, I think back to time in high school. I think that was like the early inspiration for my business interest and joining a group called FBLA. And I remember learning about business for really kind of the first time there. And I would say kind of formal business for the first time there. But before that, I grew up in a family where we were, middle class, maybe low middle class, and really had to do everything on our own. And I'm thankful for that time now and learning those things, from working on the cars with my dad to working on house projects with my dad to whatever it might be in the family, helping other members of our family at their houses or friends do house projects and car projects and all the things that you could do with your hands. So I loved all that stuff. And as I was growing up, my grandparents had bought some property and started an apple orchard as kind of their retirement business. And during that time, I got exposed to the hard work of keeping fruit trees alive and growing apples, from trimming them to pruning them, to thinning apples, you name it. Some of the most monotonous, boring work you could ever do. But I love being outside and love doing that work, and got to spend a lot of time with my dad and my grandpa over there. And my grandpa, was also a military guy, spent some time in the Navy, and then was a test flight engineer for McDonnell Douglas, who's now owned by Boeing, of course, who's getting a ton of bad press, but we'll put that past us for now. And anyway, during his time there, he participated a lot in a lot of extracurricular stuff outside of the Flight Test Society, and also with his involvement in the orchard. And he would take me to a lot of these events. So I was, gosh, I can't even remember how young I was when I started going, but I would go to like business meetings with him, just kind of call them dinners, if you were, like a formal dinner on some presentation about, flight test engineering type stuff, and some various business meetings and things that groups that he was part of, he would bring me to. And I got a ton of inspiration about seeing people speak and lead and run companies and talk about companies. And that's kind of where I guess the real bug was planted. And then I talked about, high school, which was obviously after this, and kind of poured some additional inspiration into seeing things. And then I started paying attention to people that were really great in their craft, whether they were business owners and leaders at that time, like the Jack Welches of the world, or even the Lance Armstrongs of the world, the Tiger Woods guys, right? Like guys that were just top of their class, best of breed in their craft, whatever it might be. And just started looking at, how do these guys get so darn good at the things they're doing? It gave me a lot of inspiration to say, I would like to be somebody that is inspiring, can lead people, and have the opportunity to do that. So that's where it all kind of started. From there, I joined the military right out of high school. That gave me some, I would say, some much needed autonomy away from a huge family, which was shell shock to me. Holy cow, was so homesick when I went in the military. And because I grew up 0 to 18 with a huge family, my mom was one of five, and I have 11 cousins on that side. And we spent, so many weekends together, evenings together. I always had a lot of people around me, and I'm a bit of an introvert. So it was a good thing for me to be around a big family like that. But when I left and went to the military, it was like, holy cow, I don't know anybody. I have no one. And then I got an assignment to go to Italy, which scared the crap out of me. And I started looking into that, going, do I want to go to Italy? Like, yeah, I know where Italy is on a map, but I never really thought about living in Europe. And as I did some research and people were offering to trade me their assignments, they're like, oh my gosh, Paul, you got a great assignment. And I started going, all right, I think I got something good here. So, so I ended up hanging on to that Italy assignment, moved to Italy, lived in Italy for 6 years with the military, and great experience for a number of reasons to give me quite a bit of worldly experience during that time, and grow up from literally 18 to 24 years old was my time in the military. So it was an eye-opening experience for me, for somebody growing up in the Midwest, and really just not seeing a whole lot of the world prior to that. So that set me up for a very different perspective on life, a very different perspective on the world, and really opened my eyes to a ton of stuff here. So after that, I moved back to Missouri and started working at MasterCard right out of the gates, doing security work for them, which was great. I literally left the military doing the exact same thing, took it to MasterCard, and did the exact same thing there. It was super. I was super fortunate to be get the skills out of the military that directly applied to the private sector, if you will. And spent about a year at MasterCard, then moved over to a company called Worldwide Technology, where I spent almost 11 years at that company. I think 11, 12 years between those two companies. And I started off as a systems, or actually a field service engineer, going out installing systems that the team was selling. Then I got into the sales side of it as a sales engineer. Then they moved me down to Texas to take over a territory down in Austin, covering a few states, and ended up growing to covering about 10 or 12 states. And that's when I moved into becoming actually a business leader. And that was a great thing about Worldwide Technology. I should say, one of the many great things about Worldwide Technology. It was a great company to work for, and I was lucky to be there. But they, when you became an account manager, managed a territory, or managed, an account base, they let you run it like a business. So you get a small team to support you, obviously an expense budget, and had to go get your sales quota and earn that sales quota and hit your numbers, but you were free to kind of manage your team. So that was really the first time I got to apply some of the leadership training I received in the military to civilian life and start to lead teams. And I made several mistakes along those ways, and had some tough conversations about my demeanor and how I treated people, and just how direct and aggressive I was. And I had to really tone it down as I learned to lead teams. So it was a great experience. But during that time at Worldwide, I got to be in the shadows of some amazing leaders. Our CEO, Jim Cavanaugh, he always impressed me. And it was this pretty small company when I started. I think I was one of maybe 800 people, 600 people. I can't remember when I started in 2006. So let's see, no, 2005, I think I started with them. And that would have been 2006. And yeah, I think we were 700 people at the time. And got to see a fair amount of the CEO leading the company, and inspired me even more. I had a great manager when I moved onto the sales team, gentleman by the name of Brian Thomas. He was also an exceptional leader, I think well ahead of his time and age. One of those guys who are just like, you just love to work for and love to be around. And so had a couple great role models in that company, and also around me from family, friends. My brother-in-law is another great role model that's been in business ever since he's been married to my sister, and so been fortunate to be surrounded by some inspirational leaders, some great role models. And when I moved to Austin to support Worldwide Technology, I had met a friend down there that I was dating, and she had a friend that had just gone through the executive MBA program at McCombs business school down there at UT. And I said, that's a pretty good school. Can I get into that? And can I get into that program? So she set me up with this guy, and we met, and I'm like, I can get into this program. If this guy's in this program, I can do this. Right. You know, and I wasn't judging him or anything. It was just like,
Yeah.
this is just another normal person, right? I can do this. So I applied, got into the program, and that was really kind of the gateway that said, all right, I'm ready to do this business thing. And going through that program, it was 2 years of basically all you can eat. It was an executive program, so we met every other Friday and Saturday all day. And then Friday night, there was typically some type of seminar on everything from speaking, emotional intelligence, business networking, you name it. Any seminar you could imagine, and sometimes just meeting with some local business leaders that were very very influential in the Austin area, from some of the Dell business leaders to some of the other companies around the area. So it was a great program over those 2 years. And during that program, people are always like, "Hey, why are you here?" Here we are. The average age is probably 35 years old. That's about how old I was when I started the program. And we had some younger folks in the program, and some quite a bit older. I think the youngest was probably late 20s. The oldest was probably in their 50s. And it brings a great group together. But the whole reason most people take an executive MBA program is because they're looking to make some changes in their life, right? You're mid 30s on average, going, where do I want to take my career from here? And that was the big question that I had to answer. And I went into it going, I want to start or buy a business. So knowing that I wanted to start or buy a business, that was the answer I gave everybody. And that eventually connected me with my business partner here, Doug. And Doug and I met during that program. And during our time there, he was also looking to start or buy a business. So as we got towards the end of the program, Doug was working for a company that was actually a customer of Nova's. And he comes up to me and says, "Hey, we're buying equipment from this small company out of Denver. The owner's, I believe, in his early 60s. And we're a $2 billion company buying from the small little company. And we don't know what his succession plans are, where this company is going to go in the future. So we're kind of concerned as a big company buying from a smaller supplier, smaller partner." And he goes, "You interested in taking a look at this company with me, Paul?" He goes, "You got a sales background?" He goes, "I've got an operations background, and maybe we could pair up and look at it." So we did. We looked at it in 2017, I think, was when we first met Voight. And when I first met Voight, Doug had already met him. And the rest is history from there. That's a whole nother story once that kind of chapter started. So in a long-winded version, Josh, that's kind of how I got here. Did I ever expect to be here? And I think I always had aspirations to be here. I've always been pretty focused when I have goals. And here I am, through some luck, some some forks in the road, some mistakes, you name it. It's a big recipe of many things that got me here, and thankful and grateful to be surrounded around by some great people along the way, and really be surrounded by a great company that we built here over the last 6 years, and the people we have in the company.
Yeah. I mean, just your typical story, right? The Midwest, to Italy, back to the Midwest, to Texas, and now to Denver, right? So just how everybody does it.
Yeah, it's I went from eating steak and potatoes to drinking fine wine and fine cheeses. Very
Yeah.
different culture for me as a Midwestern kid. It was very, very interesting. And I
Yeah.
was in Northern
That's,
Italy too, which Northern Italy is very different from Southern Italy. Very different, just very different lifestyle up there. The Italians are very precise and very, very, very keen to details, and which is why Italian food and that culture is so special.
yeah. So maybe I'm not as Italian as I think I am, right?
Well, I think
Uh,
there's two different parts of Italy. There's Northern Italy and there's Southern Italy. They're very, very different.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I bet you can guess which part my side of the family's from. So, but that brings up a good point because we've been to these sales dinners that we go to quite often, and whenever that wine list comes out, I know that you've got a good recommendation. So, I appreciate your time in the Air Force, if for nothing else than just being able to pick a great wine. So,
I
but
think
yeah,
my skills around wine are I would say getting rusty. I think I knew a lot more about it when I was in Italy than I do today, but that's such is life.
awesome. Well, you also said something too there that I also didn't know about you. Is you started out as kind of the field service engineer type with Mastercard, or was it Worldwide Technologies? One of the two there. But
Yep, worldwide.
you know that's an interesting journey, right? Because we hear it even in our own business, right? Someone who starts as a field service engineer, they're out there looking at our systems all the time. They know them inside and out, and oftentimes are great at customer facing. So, do you think that was important for you in building your skill set as a sales professional, right? To kind of have that field service engineer background, and then is that something that you think is great to have, right? You have all the technical knowledge, the inside and the outside of it, but you're also very interested in the business side. So I was just curious sort of how you married the two there to say, okay, I'm really interested in business, but I'm going to go be a field service engineer here. And then as soon as you get there, were you already thinking, like some of the field service engineers we know, right? As soon as you get into that role, you're like, all right, I'm going to do sales now. Was that kind of the your journey to sales, or was it? Did you see an opportunity and you thought, hey, this is a good chance to get my entrepreneurial appetite going? And is that sort of what led you into the sales role?
The That's a good question. I think at the time I certainly wasn't methodical about it, going, hey, I'm going to do this and this is going to get me into sales and this is going to get me into business. Certainly wasn't the case. It was just Paul going through life, trying to make the best decisions that I could make. But when I went into Worldwide and was working as a field service engineer, I'm trying to remember, maybe a couple years into it, I was working on this project for the Missouri National Guard. We were making these mobile response trailers and putting a bunch of technology in them. And I'd learned a lot working on this project, right? You become intimately knowledgeable about the technology and the project because we were doing everything from wiring it to labeling it to programming it. So during that time, I became really an expert on that solution. And the sales team actually invited me to speak about the product to a potential customer. I think it was another National Guard state. And when I had that opportunity, they said, hey, Paul did a really good job. Maybe we should ask him if he wants to be a sales engineer. So the sales team approached me about becoming a sales engineer. And that's when I first got over to the sales team. And I did the sales engineering thing for a while. They called us CSEs, consulting systems engineers. And I did that for a while. And then eventually there was an opening in Texas. And the gentleman that was running the sales team, I think was also running the engineering team at the time, the sales engineering team. And he said, hey, Paul, there's an opportunity in Austin if you're interested. And it was a perfect step for me because when you're in field service, like you said, Josh, you are intimately knowledgeable about the products and you're doing everything. You know them really, really well. And then as I became a sales engineer, you get a little further away from the technology. It's kind of like you need to know how it works, but you don't need to make it work anymore. And I really was and it was kind of an awkward spot for me. It's certainly nice when you're an expert to speak to people about something and sell something. When you're an expert, it just makes it easier. You're super confident about the product. And then as I became a sales engineer, you become a little further removed from the technology. Your hands aren't on it every day, and you're less of an expert. You're more of a generalist. And that was a little bit of a tougher role for me. So when the sales opportunity came up, I said to myself, I said, you know what? I feel like I'm in sales already. I might as well just get focused on the business side of it. And I was super excited about that opportunity. And I was really excited also to move down to Austin, Texas. I had heard great things about Austin at the time. And it was certainly different from the culture that I was in Missouri. And it was what I felt more like the culture I left in Italy. And it was in some ways very different than others, but I had really missed the Italian culture that I left. I'd lived there for 6 years, and I'd really just missed the active, energetic culture of Italians. They spent a lot of time outside. We were at the foot of the Dolomites, so I spent a lot of time playing in the mountains. And getting down to Austin, there aren't mountains, but there's a very active culture down there. So that's how that all happened. And there was something I was going to say as I was talking there, and I kind of forgot it, but what was it? Anyway, maybe it'll come back to me. It was something about field service and that transition. Oh, I know what it was. That was a really tough transition to go from being somebody that was technical to becoming a salesperson, because I could still do most of the technical stuff, but to get focused on the business side and let go of all the technical stuff, because I had a team, a small team that helped me with all that technical stuff and put those solutions together. So letting go of all that and getting focused on the business side and scaling the business was a really tough transition for, I would say, somebody that was really programmed to be an engineer and had an engineering mindset and very logical A to B linear type thinking. So that was a tough transition, but I survived. I survived somehow.
And and going from a scenario, right, where you kind of control the outcomes to where you're sort of leaning on a team a little bit more to develop solutions and things like that, that maybe wouldn't be the exact solution that you had, right? So it probably gave you um, some experience there, letting go of some of the process, right? That's probably good for you, and probably took a little time to learn, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it certainly did. And that's exactly what it was. Letting go of the process, letting the team do their work, and supporting your team and making sure they had everything they needed to be successful and do their job really well. So that was a learning curve for sure.
Awesome. And the other thing too that came up from your answer there is, if you're comfortable sharing this, your decision making process, right? You're a very detailed guy. You seem to be able to think through every scenario, and we've been a part of a lot of decisions together, right, that we've made. And I'm always like, thank God Paul was on that call, because I would have went this way, right? There are a couple times that has happened. So would you be willing to share some of your decision making process, and kind of what are the non-negotiables for you, or what you're looking for when you're trying to make a decision? Because you had so many decisions to make over your, several years, whether it be in the military or at Worldwide or even here at Nova. So I'd be interested to know what your decision process is like now, and sort of how you've gotten to that point and how it's evolved over the years.
That's a good question. That's probably something I should write down and take some notes on, and say, hey, this is my decision making process, and formulate that. Maybe formalize that. First thing I'd like to say is there was a leader at Worldwide Technology that helped me evaluate some decisions. And one of the things he taught me was, he said, Paul, one thing I like to do is ask myself the question, if I don't do this, will I regret it? And that is something that has stuck with me for many years now. And that's a question I like to ask in any decision-making process is, if I don't do this, will I regret it? And that applies to a lot of the personal decision-making things that I evaluate, for my personal life. But it also applies here in business. And I think that's a good question to ask. And then as I am working on making decisions, Josh, by the time we might interact on a decision, I've probably been thinking about it for a month. Like it's probably come up before and we didn't have to make decisions, so we were able to kick it down the road. I think there's a time to make decisions quickly and there's a time to push decisions out so you can get a little bit smarter and make the best decision. But decision making is really about getting as much information as you possibly can to make the best possible decision you can at that particular time. And if you don't have enough information, it's hard to make a good decision. I've made plenty of poor decisions here in the last 6 years running worldwide. Doug and I always joke about some of our bad decisions, and at the time, it was the best thing we could have done because it was seemed to be the most logical decision based on the information we had at that time. So there's been some tough ones. I think one that was challenging was you and I were evaluating a trade show scenario at one point, and that was an interesting situation. As you noticed, we went out and gathered information. We met with some of the people we were interacting with that the decision really was about, and we pulled as much information as we could to see how it felt. Is this something we wanted to go down and venture down? Did it make sense for our business? Did it make sense for all the stakeholders in the business? And I think that's another thing as a business owner you have to ask is, all right, we've got a group of stakeholders here. We've got employees, we've got customers, might have investors, all of our partners and suppliers, our community here in Denver. How does this affect everybody in our cohort, all of our stakeholders as we have to make these decisions? And where does it provide value? And does it align with our goals, our mission, vision, and values, that kind of thing? So those are the questions that I often ask as I'm going through the decision-making process. And you get some of them right, you get some of them wrong. I think the key to business is if it's a really big decision that could hurt your company and hurt your stakeholders, you take a lot of time and you be very, very careful with those decisions. On the flip side, if it's something that has minimal risk to it and you just need to move forward, let's move forward, right? Because moving forward in business also is about efficiency. And if you take too much time to make decisions, you can paralyze the company. So it's just a fine balance of how you work through those things and how you manage that process.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing some of that with us. Yeah, that was the scenario I was thinking about as well. So I learned a lot from you in that in that period of time when we were going through that scenario. So
yeah, and we got that one right. It looks for now.
Yeah.
It could change, and we'll see where that goes. Right, like
Yeah.
a decision today, maybe it's the right decision today. It could be the wrong decision a year from today.
Sure.
And I think that's the humbling thing about business is it's not about being right and it's not about being wrong. It's about trying to make the best decisions you can at the time and direct your resources and your team and the best path forward at that particular time. And most importantly, being willing to change your position as you move forward. Because if you are an anchor to one direction and the market shifts, you could run the business into the ground, and the market can shift quickly. So
Yeah.
I think being very aware of what's happening in your market and all the variables surrounding the market and your people, and adjusting your compass heading as you need. Being anchored to a position is a dangerous thing in business, if you ask me.
Yeah. And I think what's cool about our team is we have the engineering chops and the operations chops and the leadership chops, right? To be flexible, and we get a lot of opportunities that we can really look at and say, hey, we know we can do this, but do we want to do this, right? And for me as the sales guy, sometimes it's easy to have some tunnel vision and say, oh yeah, I know we can do this, let's do it, right? But hey, maybe that doesn't make sense. So that's
a good point. That's probably one of the toughest things is deciding what you shouldn't do versus what you should do and where you should spend time and resources on and what projects you should take as a company. that's a challenging thing. At Worldwide, the leadership used to say, you know, let's focus on, majoring in the majors, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, if we're focused in this is our major league focus. Like, let's major in those majors. If we get distracted by a bunch of other things that we're not great at, then it's probably going to decrease the value we provide to our customers and our stakeholders, and ultimately going to be, a worse business outcome if we get distracted. So I think that's staying focused is critical to a business like ours. When you're right, we have what I believe is probably one of the best engineering teams in the industry for our company and the size of the company we have. I don't think there are many people that compare to some of the engineers we have on our team. We're fortunate to have our founder with us, Karpala. He's probably one of the most talented designers in the industry. I mean, he's been doing it for a long time and super, super sharp. So having that capability and being vertically integrated here at Nova gives us a ton of flexibility to fix some of our mistakes and maybe help us redirect any of the potential bad decisions we might make along the way. So yeah,
Yeah.
grateful to have such a great team.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, like you said, it's been a weird 6 years, right? I guess maybe weird isn't the best word, but there are certainly going to be ups and downs every week, every year, every month, probably as a business owner. And I think the decision making process that you outlined is really great, right? You know that you're able to think through the entire process. Where, as someone where I'm looking at how I make a decision, I've learned a lot from you and a lot of people in our company on decision making. So, a good example, comical example would be, hey, I could buy a house in, I don't know, 2 minutes, right? I could make that decision really quick, but then it might take me, I don't know, 6 hours to book travel because I want to make sure I'm not staying at a rough hotel, right? So how do you manage the decision making of decisions that you might feel pressured on? And I bring up the house example because when I purchased a house, it was a hot market, right? The open house we did on FaceTime, and we had an offer in an hour later, where that was you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, but then hey, something like just as simple as booking a hotel might take me forever, because there aren't as many consequences, right? Or there's not as much pressure. So how do you balance the high pressure decisions with the kind of the decisions that you can really think about for a long time that might not have a huge impact? Does that make sense?
Sure. The high pressure decisions, gosh, come down to, again, I still kind of try to run the same playbook, get as much information as quickly as I can. And if they're high pressure, typically it means you have a very short timeline to make this decision.
Yeah.
Because if you if you're not in a rush to make the decision, then it takes a lot of the pressure off. So one, it's trying to gather as much information as you can. Like I said before, I think that's important, and getting other people's opinions. Right, we have great people here. Like I said, we still have our founder here. I have a great business partner. So those two, I bounce a lot of things off of, and we make collective decisions too, right? It's not obviously all me making these decisions in a vacuum. So we'll collectively sit down and triangulate ideas and try to come up with different outcomes and evaluate, if we make this decision, what are the potential outcomes? If we make this decision, what are the potential outcomes? If we make this decision, what are the potential outcomes? And then evaluate those outcomes and say, hey, what's the best outcome here based on what we're dealing with? And the thing that I would say is, as I go through life, no matter what it is, I can typically look back at the bad decisions and go, if I would have just listened to my gut, I knew that was a bad decision. And whether it's intuition, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, that sixth sense, for me, I feel like there's something there, and I just have to listen to that inner voice and trust that inner voice at times when I'm in a situation where I can't get all the information to make a clear decision. It's like, all right, let's see how I really feel about this inside, what my heart's telling me, what my gut's telling me. And sometimes you have to just listen to yourself And sometimes you have to trust that. And that's hard when you don't have all the information. But I would say that's where I go when I can't get all the right information. I don't have time to do enough analysis of the situation and get enough data, is to go, okay, like I've got to make a gut call here. What feels right about this? And you try to make as few of those as possible, because although I said I look back and I feel like my gut has told me, has been a good guiding light for me, it hasn't always been right. So you try to make as few of those as possible. I think that's advice I would give, is try to slow the world down and take time to make the right decisions when you can,
Yeah.
especially if they're important. And again, as as we talk here, obviously you can't do that all the time, but
Yeah.
that's what I try to do.
Yeah. So if you would have just went with another sales guy other than me, we'd be all right. That's just one of those decisions that maybe you went with your gut and it came back to bite you.
You're
So
on your
switching
way.
gears here.
You're doing great things for us, Josh. Don't beat yourself up here. It's a tough market right now, and
Yeah.
we're going to come out on the other side of this in a really good spot.
Well, as you know, I'm a master of self-deprecation, so I had to get that one in there. But
well, it's good. You make me laugh, and
so
I need
switching.
that.
Oh yeah. That's the one thing I'm pretty confident I'm better at most people. I right, making people laugh, so I'll take that one with me. But switching gears, you mentioned, hey, it's a tough market, right? It is a tough market. And it's been a hot market during your time here. There's been, a little bit slower markets as well. So how do you navigate those ups and downs, over the last 6 years of being a business owner when, that these ups and downs, sure, they impact you, they impact the business, but they're also impacting, real people within our business. What's that like? And how do you manage that? Burden might not be the right word, but how do you manage all that weight on your shoulders to run a company, regardless of how the economy is or the market or, the things that are going on in the world?
That's a good point. I think, let's see, we're just over 6 years now of owning and running Nova, and this is probably the third, I would call it, serious kind of downturn that we've been in. And in manufacturing, downturns are interesting because you can protect yourself from them by building out a backlog. So thankfully, we've been in this downturn from a bookings perspective for probably 15, 16 months. And thankfully, we came into it with a really strong backlog, so that it helped us. This is probably the third one that we've been through in 6 years. And it's been a very interesting market from I would say, the social challenges that we've seen from, various political conflicts in our country over the last 6 years to the pandemic. There's been a lot of negative energy and challenges for everybody in this country outside of work. So as we go through this stuff and these ups and downs, we have employees that are dealing with challenges that they've never dealt with either, and bringing a lot of that energy to work. And as we went through all this, and I'm sitting here, analyzing it and watching this happen and seeing people come to work frustrated about our country, frustrated about, their lives and how the pandemic has impacted them, and going, holy cow, what are we doing here? My goal was to build a great company that's a fun place to work, that people have a safe, secure job. And holy cow, we have people coming to work and they're stressed and upset about life outside of work. They're stressed and upset about life at work because it's tough. And it was like, all right, how do we bring maybe some calm to the storm? How do we stabilize? And although there is a storm outside of work, how do we make this feel like a comfortable place and a safe place and an enjoyable place to be during these tough times? And the burden that you mentioned that sits on my shoulders about making sure the employees have a stable, safe job, fun place to work, place they enjoy coming is really about taking care of people. And if we're taking care of our people and making sure they're the focus, then that burden's gone from me, right? As long as our decision making process includes what is best for our people, then there are things outside of my control that don't sit so heavy when things go poorly. It's, hey, in the last 12 months, I knew that we did everything possible to take care of our employees, protect our employees, and provide a stable, fun place to work. And when things go south and you have to make some adjustments, it doesn't sit so hard, right? It doesn't hurt so bad and doesn't keep me up at night so much when I know we're doing all the right things. And as we've gone through this challenging time, it's been a challenging time for me as a leader and really learning and growing with the business. You know, 6 years ago, I was a very different leader, was able to be a different leader because the business was in a different spot. Every so often, I kind of have to reinvent my skills, grow my skills to keep up with the business, or I'm holding the business back. So, one of the things that kind of along this process was I was like, a lot of people are carrying a lot of emotional weight due to what's happening outside of work, in our country, in our economy, with the pandemic. How do I become more emotionally intelligent? And that was a big push for me a couple years ago, was to really raise my EQ up so I could be a better kind of emotional leader than just a business leader. And with that brought some of the things you've seen us do here with the mindfulness exercise and the mindfulness education and some self-compassion stuff that we do here at Nova, and really trying to provide people with the tools to say the glass is actually half full instead of being half empty, right? Because if you have, the glass can always be half full and it can also be half empty, depending on how you look at life. And I don't think as a business leader of a small business, you can survive unless you're an optimist. It's challenging. You get curveballs every day and you got to learn to roll with them. You got to learn to be optimistic. And that energy that I show up with here is incredibly important to the energy in the company. And if I bring bad energy, people feel it. And just like if they bring bad energy, I feel it. And that's what was happening, was people were bringing bad energy into work and I was feeling it and saying, I don't like this. This is not working. I want people to be happy here. And that's why we took a little bit of a shift in being, let's be a little bit more mindful company and being a little bit more compassionate and really learn a little bit more about each other and what makes each other tick, and learn how to compliment each other, learn how to appreciate each other. And that's been a big shift for us here over the last few years.
Yeah, no, that's great that you bring that up, and sort of what led to all that, the mindfulness exercises that we do and things like that. So I think the natural transition here is to say, okay, we've talked about, Paul, the business person. We've talked about Nova, the business. We've talked about the challenges of being a CEO and having the burden of knowing your decisions and how you run the company and your energy bring so many consequences, right? Because if you're down, people will be down, things like that. So how important is it for you to unplug and, and get out of the business for even a few hours, right? Because it could be, I'm sure you can work 24 hours a day for the next, 10 years and still feel like you have a ton of work to do, right? But how important is it for you to unplug? And then also, what are you passionate about that you like to do when you unplug? I know you like the outdoors, but yeah, would be interested to know how hey, I'm getting all these signals, and I know it's time I need to go unplug for a day or two. And then what do you do?
That's a great question. The I'm obsessive with things that I get interested in. Business is one of those things, and I have to watch that kind of character trait because it can run me into the ground for sure, no question about that. So when you know we had just bought Nova and first started running Nova, I mean that was everything, right? I was
Yeah.
you know eating, sleeping, drinking, breathing Nova. And that was good for a time period. And yeah, it wore me out. No question about it. I drove myself into the ground and had some struggles outside of work and relationships that I was in, and really had to go, okay, I need to start taking care of the other side of Paul here. This professional side is tough. It's growing, it's working. I need to focus over here and really start taking care of myself. And that's I think necessity drives behavior in humans sometimes, and that was certainly the case for me. Was I was a shell of a person after a couple of years of running this company, and it really forced me to say, all right, like I'm not who I want to be right now. I don't have the mind clarity, the focus, the attitude, the positive energy I want. How do I get back to who I want to be here? And and that's important as a leader, is really balancing effort and energy and taking care of yourself. It certainly is for me, because as I start to drop off that cliff, my performance at work starts to, even though the effort is still 150%, my performance, instead of being, A level, might become B level and C level, but I'm still trying really, really hard. And unfortunately, I'm just banging my head against the wall because I'm so burnt out. My mind's worn down that I got to take a step back and relax and get the mind focused again. And, Nova really forced me to kind of come to some awareness about my body, my mind, my heart, my emotions, and say, all right, well, let's check in with myself on a regular basis instead of just going on 100 miles an hour all the time. And as I did that, things such as, mindfulness training, meditation. I'm a big, exercise person, and love being in Colorado. There's a ton of outdoor activities I can get involved in. So getting focused back on taking good care of my health was something I had to do here a couple years in, as I was just kind of running myself in the ground. And it doesn't take much. And I think getting the right amount of rest, exercising, a decent diet, and then taking some time to recharge your mind and your spirit a little bit, whatever that might be. Something that just gives you that spiritual and mental kind of regeneration, whatever those activities might be. I've taken workshops and retreats and done many different things that have given me just a break mentally and emotionally, and just given me time to recharge. So there's a bunch of different tools out there. One thing that I honestly really enjoy doing is when I travel, I typically, on takeoff and landing, am reading a fictional book, because those 20 minutes until I can yank out the laptop, and those 20-30 minutes when I got to put the laptop away, are just a great time to just check out and read a fictional adventure novel. Those are the things I like to read. Is just a disconnect. So that's one tool I use. It's a simple tool, but it literally, on a regular basis, gives me 20 or 30 minutes just of a break, and let my mind just kind of wander off into fantasy land and listen to some adventure author talk about some cool story about some guys hijacking a ship and saving it from the bad guys. and,
Yeah, rather than hanging onto your laptop trying to pull it out, saying, come on, I think we're at 10,000 feet. What the heck? Let's go. Let me take
yeah,
my laptop out.
exactly. Oh yeah, or getting scolded by the flight attendants. Absolutely. Sir,
Yeah.
could you please put that away?
Yeah.
Yeah. One more second. I got to get this email out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Come on, they're waiting.
there's so many tools that are out there. We're in a great era of, I would say, information availability. And I love this podcast era that we're in. Obviously, we're doing one right now, but it's great to be able to queue up a podcast and listen to and have access to all these incredible people out there. Whether I listen to, people in the outdoor adventure, kind of athletics and sports industry, to business leaders, whoever your podcast host of choice might be, hosting the likes of Elon Musk, if that's your thing, Gary Brecka, if you're into health and fitness, Huberman, all these different folks that are out there. I like impact theory. There's so many great podcasts and information and tools out there that we can learn about and practice to keep ourselves sharp and keep ourselves healthy and make sure we're not burning ourselves into the ground.
Yeah. And, now that you've finally done the NOVAcast, you can, finally move on to some of those other pods that have been trying to get you. I know Rogan's been all over you trying to get you on his podcast. So, now that you've got this one out of the way, you can say, okay, Joe, I'll give you an hour. But
yeah, sorry, Joe. Look, the schedule's so tight. NOVAcast is first dibs here, first on the list. But you're right. Yeah. I'll make sure I have my agent give Rogan a call and get us queued up for that one.
Hey, one thing before we go. So you mentioned something that I think is pretty cool, right? So you talked about you and Doug buy Nova and you're in just eat, sleep, breathe Nova mode for 3 years, right? Or however many years. And the company is really successful, right? Things are going great. So is it tough? How do you find that balance to say, hey, this is how I know to run this company, but then have the self-awareness, like you just said, to say, hey, I've got to make some changes to be able to still run a successful company, but just in a different way. Because that's something that I've struggled with in the past too. It's like, I know how to do this way. And, maybe this is the only way that I know how to do it. Right. But yeah, life, throws you things and you have to learn how to adjust and say, maybe you don't have all that time that you used to have. Right. So how do you manage that?
Well, there's a few different answers to that question. I think one is, as a business grows, the leadership team needs to grow with it. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to go, what am I really good at as a leader? What am I not so good at? And find somebody who's much better than you at those things you're not good at to do that job. And that's the great thing about growing a business is, we grow a business for a number of reasons. A lot of people think, we're growing a business just to make money. And that's not necessarily true. It's one of the reasons, because making money makes a more stable business, creates a lot of opportunity. But that's the big thing is, as the business grows, we're able to bring on people that can do some of the jobs that I might doing as a small chippy company, trying to make things happen, and take that hat off and give it to somebody else. And then all of a sudden, all right, our company's in a better place because we've got somebody that is more skilled at doing this job than the other person in the company that was wearing 4 hats. So whether that's me, you wear a lot of hats in our company as well. We brought on recently a marketing person to help you with some of the content development. So those types of things are the benefit of growing a company, is that company gets stronger because you get to get better talent in positions where somebody that might be wearing multiple hats is a little bit weaker. And then the other part of this is, you do have to grow sometimes, and retool yourself and kind of change out that tool belt as the company grows. And I think just kind of brainstorming here, thinking about this in my head, I think as the company grows and as I have matured, kind of from an ego perspective, from a heart perspective, from a spirit perspective, it gets much easier to get yourself out of the way and understand that, hey, I am weak in this area. I need to get better in this area, or find somebody that can do it better than me. And that becomes more and more apparent and easy to identify as the business grows and I grow, and just being humble about it. And that's, you can't be an expert at everything, and you can't be great at everything. And you have to wear a lot of hats as the business starts and grows, because you just don't have the resources. But as the company grows and you build those resources and you build in the capability and are able to add those resources, you can certainly do it. So I think it's 2 parts there. Is one, the best answer is find somebody that can do it better than you and give them an opportunity to do that. And then 2, if this is exactly something that needs to be in your job description as a leader and you need to grow around it, get help, right? Find people to help. There's tons of help out there. And most of the time, if leaders that are running companies are oftentimes high functioning people that if they want to put some time into something and get better at it, they can. And typically when companies get stagnant or don't grow, it has a lot to do with the leader not growing and the leader being called stubborn about their growth and focusing on things that maybe they don't need to focus on. And yeah, sometimes it can get away from me and I can go months before I realize like, oh wow, I need to improve on this. It might be a random person at a gas station that clicks the switch in there that you bump into at the gas pump. That's like, that is something I need to work on. And you identify it. And honestly, I think surrounding yourself as a leader by good people that can give you honest, direct feedback is very critical. And, I expect that from you, Josh, is, we interact on a daily basis. And if I'm missing the mark, I want that feedback from you. I want that feedback from Doug and Foyt, because there aren't a lot of people that want to give me feedback, right? It's
Sure.
for a number of reasons. And, when you're in the leadership team, you got to have people around you that can give you that feedback, because sometimes you just miss it and you have those blind spots. So, I think there's a number of things to help out there to keep people on the right track and make sure the business has what it needs to grow if you can't give it to it as a leader.
Yeah. And last question for real this time. I know we're short on time. So how important is it to have somebody outside of the business to be able to come in and check you, right? When you need, or, to say, hey, Paul, I'm starting to see maybe you're dipping into, you're showing me these signals that you told me to look out for, right? How important is it to have somebody outside of Nova? I compare that to, like growing up playing Little League, right? Your dad could tell you, hey, you're stepping out of the box when, you're jumping out of the way of the ball's nowhere near you. Be like, no, you're wrong, Dad. But then, hey, some random person comes up and say, hey, it looks like you're stepping out a little bit. Here, try this. And then you try it, and all of a sudden you start hitting the ball. That to me is I think something that's important too, right? Because when you're in it and everybody else is in it, that feedback might be hard to listen to, right? So how important is it for you to have those, let's call them third party resources, maybe another CEO in the area, or, other peers that you kind of go to
Sure.
to bounce those ideas off of?
Yeah, that's a really good point. As we were going through this early on, and I was telling you, I was 24/7 Nova was the mantra that I was listening to and beating my drum to and getting burnt out. I was looking for help and was lucky enough to find some great peer groups in the community here. And we belong to a couple here as a company, and having other business leaders and having access to them and being able to bounce ideas off of. And honestly, we meet in a couple of these groups, we meet every other week. One, we try to meet monthly. And what's interesting is they might be talking about something that we haven't even ran into yet here at Nova. So in a year or two, when we do run into it, I've at least heard a story from somebody that can give me some kind of guiding light to navigate whatever it might be. But yeah, having a peer group to bounce ideas off of and finding people that have gone through something before is critical to navigating this, because otherwise you're just by yourself as a leader, and you got to find, called a support group, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
it is just a support group and you're just venting, and maybe they might not have solutions and ideas, but you can at least share the pain you might be going through and the fear you might be dealing with as a leader. And just talking about it is sometimes half the battle. I think shedding light on darkness is instant relief for whatever we may be feeling. And that goes in business or in life. If you're going through a tough time in life and you feel like you're alone and you don't have anybody to talk to about it, that's hard. It's scary. and business is the same way. But the moment you get to open up about it, you get some relief. And having peers to share with and groups to share with that oftentimes have some good ideas and might even have this specific solution you need. Or they have a network of people that they talk to that you can leverage that and go find somebody that's an expert, whether it's a third party, a friend, or you're just going to meet with somebody and have coffee with and talk about something, and they give you the idea. And
Yeah.
or maybe it's you talk to 5 people and not one of those ideas was the right one, but those 5 people gave you inspiration to come up with a new idea that you put together as a
Yeah.
result of pulling in all that information. So that kind of creativity of, I would say, problem resolution, and just being, I would say creative about how you solve problems is helpful for sure.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun. It's nice to finally record one of these conversations that we usually have at an Eddie V's or some other hotel bar maybe on the road. But yeah, always a good time. I think we'll need to have you back. We'll make this a regular podcast with you. That way we can check in on Nova and check in on Paul, and we can keep everybody informed, because everybody's going to want you back now. That's going to be everybody say, hey, when's Paul coming back? And all those texts that I get about the NOVAcast, I've got a couple of buddies of mine who, they subscribe to our YouTube channel. So whenever we post one out there, I get a new one that says, hey, I had to take the afternoon off from work. Got to listen to the new NOVAcast. So the listeners are out there, and this podcast is growing. So I think this will be the bump that we need to get some of those bigger guests on.
Sure, your fan base. You're building a hell of a fan base. I mean, this has got to be the fastest growing podcast in the packaging automation space, the factory automation space. So,
Yeah.
Hats off to you, Josh. And also, I'm probably going to look at this thing when you publish it and go, man, I need some practice on these things. So I welcome the practice and would love to be on the cast again, because I certainly probably can brush up my game on these podcasts. But Josh, it's been a pleasure having you on the team for a few years now, and love what you're doing for us here at Nova, and love having you part of the business. So keep it up.
Yeah, happy to be part of it. Like being a big part of the team. So only the best from here, right? So I got to, I'd love to stay and chat for the next few hours, but I got to go make some cold calls here and sell some robots. So
go close some deals here.
Yeah, I got to move a few deals over to close one here. So
sounds great. Thanks a lot, Josh.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, we'll see you next time.
You got it.